This story takes place 27 years after the First Corporate War. The Nest by Sean Carrière. Chapter 6. The pride of Fort Iron Horse was its motor pool. Not surprising since Colonel Drake had a finger in the pie of every smuggler for over 100 clicks. This meant mobility was of the highest priority for his men out on patrol duty. So the colonel happily dumped over half his yearly budget into the machines and wrench slingers that kept his soldiers a step ahead of any sneaky runners hoping to slip past and avoid a hefty tax. The motor pool took up over a third of the compound, and boasted a half-dozen light, armored luxury SUVs, for visiting members of high command of course. 50 light armor personnel transports, half as many 8x8 cargo trucks, for hauling the colonel's loot. 80 patrol trucks, 120 ATVs, half as many dirt bikes, as well as the last running Abrams main battle tank on the continent. Under a canvas car cover at the very back of the motor pool was Colonel Drake's pride and joy, a lovingly restored 1984 Chevrolet Corvette C4 in ivory white with just under 100,000 miles on its carefully rebuilt Crossfire engine. The colonel only drove the classic car twice a year at most, but the motor pool had assigned 3 techs to keeping the vet in pristine condition at all times. To keep every other vehicle in the motor pool in good condition, Colonel Drake recruited only top-tier mechanics, engineers and technicians from motor pools all across the army. Each grease monkey under the colonel was an artist in their own right, and the maintenance bays their studios. These men and women were paid 4 times what they'd earn in their original units, and the colonel always cut them in on a small percentage of his monthly take. That kind of generosity bought the colonel the best garage jockeys this side of the gateway. Tonight, Maintenance Bay B was a flurry of activity as crews of Colonel Drake's best techs prepped Laura's truck and bench presses van for their trip deep into the C-zone. Both vehicles were up on lifts as fluids were drained and topped back up, hoses and belts replaced, complete brake service done. New run-flat tires slapped on, not to mention multiple diagnostics run for every vital vehicular system. After all, the worst place to suffer a breakdown would be inside the C-zone. Just ask Danny Blue. Kyle and Colonel Drake stood at the front of the bay, casually watching the skilled crews doing their thing as Laura watched them like a hawk, close enough to breathe down their necks. Even the experienced wheelwoman had to give the colonel's mechanics props. They moved so smoothly, had either vehicle needed a new transmission or engine, they could have swapped them out with plenty of time to spare before sunrise.
Sure could have used a team like this back in my racing days,
Laura thought to herself. Bench press, Sam and Slick were back at the motel. Kyle had ordered them to prep their gear and catch some shut-eye before rollout time. Kyle knew better than to try giving Laura the same order as she watched over her truck like an overprotective mother. So far, the wheel woman approved of everything the motor pool crews were doing to her baby. This would soon change as Kyle noticed a flatbed truck with what looked like a septic tank secured to the back pulling into the bay. The septic truck slowly pulled up and parked near the vehicle lifts. As Laura's truck and bench presses van were lowered back down, 2 soldiers wearing hazmat suits exited the cab of the septic truck and stepped around the back. The 2 soldiers then began uncoiling what looked like 2 fire hoses. Luckily, the septic truck didn't smell like it looked, but that's not to say it smelled good. Wafting off the massive tank was a strong medicine odor combined with more than a hint of burnt dog hair. Laura was so distracted by the stench, she didn't notice the mechanics quickly taping over the windows, door seals and wheels of her truck and bench presses prisoner van in the same way they'd prep cars for a new paint job. When she did notice, Laura tried asking the chief mechanic what was going on. Instead of a verbal answer, he just gave Laura a painter's gas mask and pointed for her to go stand with Kyle and Colonel Drake by the doors. Before Laura could insist on knowing what they were about to do, she was horrified to see the 2 soldiers in hazmat suits begin spraying a thick, gray sludge all over her truck as well as bench presses van. If the sight of the 2 vehicles getting drenched in goop wasn't bad enough, the smell was far, far worse. It was the kind of odor that could make a professional shit shoveler take their own nose off with a metal grinder.
What the hell are your boys doing to our vehicles?
Laura shouted to Colonel Drake as best she could through the gas mask. The Colonel and Kyle had already been given masks of their own, and had already put them on.
Sorry, my dear,
began the Colonel.
That gunk sure is nasty, but it'll provide extra shielding from the radiation. Besides, it can be removed once you're back from the C-zone.
Laura glared at the Colonel and asked,
You telling me that shit washes off?
At that point, the chief mechanic walked up and answered Laura's question.
Not quite, ma'am. We've got to use a sandblaster.
Laura was about to go completely ballistic, but Colonel Drake motioned for her and Kyle to follow him as he walked out of the bay. Once they were outside, and had walked far enough away from the terrible smell, the Colonel removed his gas mask. Kyle and Laura waited an extra few seconds before removing theirs.
To ensure your safety, I got your team some fancy new radiation suits.
The Colonel explained as he led Kyle and Laura to a transport truck parked near the parts warehouse. The driver and another soldier were opening a crate in the back of the truck. Inside the crate were 5 large suitcases. When Colonel Drake, Kyle and Laura arrived at the back of the truck, the Colonel ordered the men inside to open Kyle's suitcase first. Inside was a radiation suit complete with boots, gloves, and a helmet with full face visor. The front of the main body of the suit had a small air filtration and an enclosed rebreather mechanism, powered by multiple shielded battery packs that were worn around the waist like a belt. The forearms of the suit were equipped with simple keypads, and the helmet's face covers were equipped with head-up displays similar to the inside of a fighter pilot's helmet. These systems combined could give the wearer real-time information on exterior radiation levels, the locations of others wearing the same kind of suits through localized networking, receive data from recon drones as well as provide constant updates on the wearer's own vital signs. Unlike the radiation suits used in the civilian world, these were not bright white or rescue crew orange. Instead, these suits were in the same dingy, dust and soot pattern used for urban camouflage.
Try it on Kyle,
said the Colonel with glee.
I just had these brought in from north of the gateway. Same suits issued to special forces when they go into areas posing a biological, chemical, or radiological threat.
Kyle fumbled with the heavy suit made of thick, gambeson-like material. Soon, the young bounty hunter had it on and was securing the helmet to the shoulders. Kyle could hear the suit powering up, and he was anxious to test out the various systems. Kyle pressed a couple buttons on the forearm keypad and the inside of his visor came alive with data. In the upper right-hand corner was a small, circular, near-transparent map with a single blinking green spot in the middle. Along the top was a thin horizontal line, similar to the life bar in a video game. This showed the radiation levels in the immediate area and was glowing blue at the moment, indicating low to acceptable numbers of rads. Along the left-hand side was a thin scroll bar with several small pictograms along it. This served as the system menu. Along the bottom of Kyle's scope of vision was a small, ghosted pictogram of a walkie-talkie with directional arrows to each side of it. Predictably, in the lower right-hand corner were posted the date and time.
Nice piece of kit, Colonel,
Kyle finally said before walking a circle several meters wide and getting himself used to the extra weight.
I won't run any marathons in this thing, but I can still move okay.
Laura had her suitcase open and was busy looking over her own suit as Kyle walked up next to the Colonel and took off his helmet. The Colonel grinned at Kyle before saying,
The slop on your vehicles will be dry soon, and you have top-of-the-line radiation suits. Hard to imagine any other precautions we could take.
Kyle answered back,
As soon as I get a copy of Danny Blue's sat phone calls to his gang, we'll be all set.
Colonel Drake quickly turned around and looked at Laura, who was now trying on her own suit. The Colonel did this in an attempt to avoid eye contact with Kyle, hoping the young bounty hunter wouldn't notice.
Does the suit fit all right, ma'am?
The Colonel asked Laura. Like Kyle had done, Laura was busying herself with the head-up display inside of her suit's helmet.
Not bad, Colonel Drake. Not bad at all.
The wheel woman answered. ever perceptive. Kyle picked up on the Colonel's discomfort. The young bounty hunter then rephrased his last statement into a question.
You still have the recordings of Danny Blue communicating with his gang, don't you, Colonel?
Colonel Drake turned to face Kyle again, but somehow still managed to avoid eye contact.
Ain't much in Danny Blue's satellite phone calls. That'd be of any use to you, Kyle.
The old warhorse said as casually as he could. This only fueled Kyle's curiosity even more.
Any info I can get before we head out would be appreciated, Colonel.
The young bounty hunter said. The Colonel's body language further betrayed his reluctance, but he finally reached into his pocket and pulled out another microdisc.
Only 2 calls were made to Danny Blue's gang.
The Colonel began.
The first was just a simple distress message with orders to come in and extract him from the C-zone.
And the second call?
Kyle asked as he held his hand out for the microdisc. After a couple of awkward seconds, Colonel Drake dropped the disc into Kyle's palm.
The second call makes no sense. It's just gibberish. Our intel boys can't seem to make heads or tails of it.
The Colonel answered, obviously uncomfortably. Kyle stared at the small device in the palm of his hand and made a mental note to listen to both messages as soon as possible, and as closely as possible. However, playing back Danny Blue's sat phone calls would have to wait as the chief mechanic approached and announced the protective sludge on their vehicles was almost dry. Colonel Drake lit up at this news and rested a reassuring hand on Kyle's shoulder.
It'll be sunup in a little over an hour. Let's load these suits into the truck and van, so you can go pick up the rest of your team.
The Colonel said in an obvious pep talk tone.
Yeah. Sure thing.
Kyle agreed as he wondered what the second message on the microdisc could be.